The Truth Girls. The Truth Girls.
Hi everyone. I talk about mind control a lot on the radio. Well, I talk about it on here, but I just sort of focus on individual incidents in the news that I think may have been related to mind control. But on the radio, I actually go into it a lot more in depth, and I've interviewed several people who have been, or in some cases still are, in mind control programs. As in people who've been programmed to be assassins and things like that. And so through my work on YouTube and on the radio, I've met quite a few people who actually have been in these programs. If you think that this is not real, that there's no such thing, well, there is, and there's lots of people who have been through it who do talk about their experiences. So what I've done is I've broken this down into a few categories of how do people end up in a mind control program. So number one, they could be born into it, and this is, I think, the case with most people who are born into elite families. Not all of them, I would say, probably, but a lot of them, and there's a lot of overlap there with satanic covens. Well, I know one person who was born into an elite family and who has several implants in her body, and she basically defected from it. And she speaks out against this stuff, and she's been relentlessly persecuted for it for years. The other one, she was in what she calls a Vatican cult as a child. And the cults the satanic cults that involve the church, usually the children of the people who are in these cults will be brought into them by their own parents. This seems to happen a lot. And they are made to participate in rituals and things like that. Rituals that are very traumatic. The person that I know was ordered to choose between the life of her sister or an anonymous boy. She said, "I refuse to choose," and they said, "Then they'll both die." So she chose the boy. And she was later told, "Oh, we would have never killed your sister." So by being born into one of these families, you know, there's a good chance that you will be dragged into their rituals and their mind control programs, and it's like it goes back generations and generations. I'm sure that all the Bushes and Clintons and all of them, they're all in these kind of programs. Okay, the next one is that you could actually be sold into one of these programs by your unsuspecting parents, and this also happened to someone who I've met, and I have her book right here. It's called My Cold War. Her name is Ann Diamond, and she's actually going to be on the radio with me on the 16th of August. That's a Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. So if you want to know more about her story, you can tune in on American Freedom Radio to the Truth Girls at that time, and then you'll get the details. Her father was in the Army, and they signed her and her twin brother up for a program here in Montreal at the Allen Memorial Psychiatric Hospital, where it is now openly known that they conducted mind control experiments there involving torture and electroshock, LSD, and things like that. And so she and her brother were brought there to what they call the parties, which was the same term that the person I know who was in the Vatican cult, that's what they called the meetings, the parties. There were other children in the Vatican cult, as I mentioned, the anonymous boy, and in the Allen Memorial, according to Anne in her book, there were children who lived there as permanent residents. And of course, in the Vatican cult, there were the children who were brought in who were sacrificed and tortured. And in the Allen, they were relentlessly tortured and brainwashed and subjected to things like isolation chambers, electroshock, and all these kinds of things, as part of the mind control experiments to see whether they could produce you know, a mind control assassin, a perfect slave, this kind of thing. Most of them killed themselves or died or ended up basically on the street. Where are the victims recruited from in cults like the Vatican cult that I told you about, or in these experiments? Well, they're recruited from the foster care program or orphanages. Orphans and kids in foster care are great candidates to be victims for this kind of stuff because there's nobody to speak up for them, and in a lot of cases nobody will even know that they're missing. And I was talking to someone else who was recruited kind of randomly, he was sort of abducted. Another person who I'm going to interview on the 23rd of August, his name is Malcolm Hawley. And he said to me, when they grabbed him and they started to program him, they said, "We look far and wide for people like you." Like, they're actively looking for people who make good candidates for mind control. He was abducted and programmed in a van, well, with drugs and torture and all that. He was able to override it somewhat because he knew what they were doing to him. Anyhow, another way that you get recruited into this is through the army. If you notice, a lot of these apparent mind control cases, like the Batman shooter, but his father was in the military, and also this shooter in Wisconsin, he was also in the military. And another person that I've talked to about this, who admitted to being in a CIA mind control program, well, he was in the military too, because the military does this kind of stuff. And the last one was getting abducted into the program. Well, Malcolm Hawley was abducted into a van and drugged and brainwashed in the van, right off the street. The other person, she had like alien abduction experiences, but I later found out, I found out at some point that the military simulates alien abduction experiences, and I think what they do is they abduct the person and they program them, and then they just make the person remember it as having been abducted by aliens. I could be wrong, but I've talked to a few people and there seems to be a pattern experiences. So I just wanted to do this because I wanted to make this list, because there's just so much of this going on. People don't take it seriously. It happens everywhere, you know. They're still doing their experiments, even if they don't do them at the Allen, they're still doing them. And yeah, please listen in on the radio sometime, because I really go in depth a lot more. And thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.